just there. Hello, Daniel.
Hello.
Cameo. This is a staircase from the first century. The archaeologist Shimon Gibson said, that's what you're sitting on. First century. This is an entry. And it says a couple of things to me. One is, that's all wrong. Because you have stairs going down into the Hinnom Valley from here. And that's all wrong. Because there would have been an opening in the wall there. And because we know what's behind that opening, we know where the staircase goes. I paused and you went, oh no, he's going to ask me where we are. Herod's Palace. Yes, yes. Remember, that's right behind this wall, Jaffa Gate, the corner here. So this stairway leads right up to Herod's Palace. Where did Jesus' trial occur? At an entryway to Herod's Palace. How do I know that? Oh, that's a good question. So let's take a look at the evidence. Remember, I promised I would show you how this works. So we have textual evidence, Bible and first century historian Josephus, and then we've got archaeology. So let me assemble those components to make the case for the fact that we are at an entrance. One, that we're at an entrance to the palace of Herod the Great, and two, that's where Jesus' trial occurred. If not at this entrance, then an entrance like this. So first of all, in the Gospels, we have two labels that are used to define where Jesus was in Roman custody. John 19:13 calls the place of judgment the stone pavement where the trial was going on. Pilate presents Jesus to the masses and says, here is your king, what do you want me to do with him? And in Matthew 27:27, we read that Jesus is prepared for execution at a place called the Praetorium. So we've got labels there. Let me take that one more step. I think the stone pavement is going to be associated with the palace of Herod, and I think the Praetorium, the word Praetorium is the Latin word for the center of a Roman camp, is where the army barracks were, which on page 78 is going to be on the northwest side of the Temple Mount. You'll see the word moat, M-O-A-T, and then the word Antonia. Antonia. There's a four-towered fortress, Antonia Fortress, northwest side of the Temple Mount. That's what I think the Praetorium is. Now, there's some people who allied those two together and make one place out of them. I think that's not right. I think we separate where Pilate's residence was in Jerusalem from where Jesus was being actively beaten in advance of his crucifixion. Second, Josephus says to us that when Pilate was in Jerusalem, and I want to caution you about that language, Pilate didn't live here all the time. He lived on the Mediterranean coast at Caesarea, where we have a very European-feeling place. We're going to have a chance to visit that. You'll see how European he made that place. Herod did. And that's where the Roman governors were, most typically. Pilate will be here during the high festivals when there's the risk of revolt going on. First century historian Josephus tells us that Pilate installed shields with the emperor's name on it on the palace of Herod the Great. So we know Pilate at least had a relationship with this building in a way that made him want to decorate it. By the way, it got him into huge trouble and he had to take them down. In the era that follows, another Roman governor by the name of Florus, who was governor from 64 to 66 AD, Florus is said to have held judicial hearings at the palace of Herod the Great, at the entry to the palace of Herod the Great. So when we put that evidence together from Josephus, we have him putting Pilate here. We have a later emperor, a later governor holding trials here. So all of that evidence really pushes me this direction here. And the archaeology at least gives us an option for where that would have been. So I think that there's a chance, though I can't say for sure, that you are standing at the place John calls the stone pavement, the plaza, outside the entry to the palace of Herod the Great, where Pilate was engaging Jesus. Now, if it's not this spot, it's another entry, and in terms of the archaeology, this is the only entry we have. That doesn't mean it's this entry, it just means it's one we have. So it's possible we're here.
Why wouldn't it have been inside?
The text in John's makes it really clear that the Jewish leadership will not go in.
Oh,
They view the Herodian palace as unclean, and so they will not enter. And so Pilate, and if you read those Gospels for movement, you'll see him moving in for some conversations with Jesus, bringing Jesus out, the language will be. And when he brings Jesus out, obviously we're dealing with some sort of entryway, and that language helps us see, again, we're at an entry rather than a need. Yes, please. Linda, right?
Linda, since this is the only entry we have
Surviving, yeah.
that has survived, is it possible that through those early years after Jesus' death and when Christianity was being spread, that this somehow was safe even through there, just traditionally, that people said this is where, and that's why it survived, or that's
It's possible. I don't have any record from the past, as I do with other buildings, that says that there was continuity of memory. So I love the argument, Linda, but I don't have the continuity of argument in the literature that says we were back. You'll hear me talk about this again in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, with the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, because there we do have a continuous historical memory from 66 AD on, and a building from 135 AD on. I don't have that. Yeah, please don't.
So let's say it was here. Would the Jewish crowd then have been just from here to that ridge?
That's what I was.
Yeah. So you're talking about people more likely who have gathered on the stairs.
On these stairs.
On the stairs.
So this is okay for the Jews to be in, but they just don't want to be inside.
Well, I'm going to work with John's language there, where he's saying, and these are not just any Jews. These are Judean leadership that have been working actively with Pilate to seek Jesus' execution. I think we do a grave disservice to the ethnic Jewish world when we lump them all together. And in fact, I would argue that the people who welcomed Jesus to Jerusalem were Galileans, and that the people here who were calling for his execution were Judeans. That's a whole other thing we'll talk about in some of the different trajectories. But we have some folks here who see Jesus not to their advantage, but as their threat. Was a threat to them, and they're the ones whose voices are ringing out and calling for his execution.
This doesn't look very big, between here and there I'm imagining hundreds of people.
Yeah, and I don't have a number. I don't have a number for us there, so I'm not sure. I mean, sometimes we have an imaginative sense of place. And again, like you said, Don, I'm not sure this is the place. So maybe we're trying to limit the numbers artificially. But again, I don't have a sense that we have a broad consensus within Judean Jerusalem that Jesus needs to be executed. There is a group that's seeking that. They have political power and influence, and they're exercising it in a way that they think will advance.
What was it, John's scripture that we referenced earlier?
John 19:13.
Would
What was the other one? The other scripture
That was Matthew 27:27. And again, I'm going to move those two events apart because I don't think, this is a luxury palace. Fountains, you've got flowers and bushes and wildlife brought in. First century historian Josephus called it wondrous beyond words. This isn't the place you prepare people for execution. That's the Roman army barracks, that's the Antonia fortress, that's on the north side of the temple, northwest side of it. So I think it's a mistake to take those two places and bring them together. And I've tried to go help her.
Would they have brought Barabbas out? Would he have been in towards Antonia Fortress? Or is there other evidence of first century prisons near here?
Yeah, that I don't have. Where exactly Barabbas would have been kept, not at the palace for sure. And I don't know that he was present here. His name is spoken. So whether this is the exact spot or not, the building is right too. That I have high confidence in. And that lets me re-enter the story in a way I hadn't perhaps before. And sometimes when I look at space, I evaluate who's advantaged, who's disadvantaged by the space where the story is evolving. And so if we think of an ordinary member of the Jewish world, society here, and they're thinking about that building, what are some adjectives that come to mind, given what you know about occupation and oppression of Rome? How do you feel about that place?
Opulent.
It's opulent.
And
My taxes help to pay for
My taxes paid for that,
it.
and I don't get to use it, right? A sense of disgust, huh? Intimidation for sure, right? This is the Roman war machine that wanders, that's in here. And again, I think we have a hard time conceptualizing what it would be to be under an occupying force where soldiers not your own are wandering the streets and people get roughed up and abused. That's just part of being occupied by a foreign force. I just hated that place. They were intimidated by it. And so when I see Jesus taken in there, my expectation might be at some level, you take a Jewish man accused of a capital crime, he is going to be terrified. He is going to be shaking. He is going to have trouble forming clear sentences. And vice versa, Pilate, the one who is dominant in that space, should be the one who expresses power, who shows confidence and verve and all of that, right? And listen again to the storyline. This as we come to the close of Lent and we hear that story. It's as if those two roles were completely inverted. Pilate is just undone by all of this. He's saying things like, I got to figure a way out of this. I'm in a predicament here. I'm going to try sending him over to Herod Antipas because he's a Galilean. And Herod Antipas, one of Herod the Great's sons, who's ruling in the north. Antipas wanted nothing to do with him, send him back. And Pilate's going, oh no, he's back here again. So he says, what else can I do? Well, I'm gonna see if I can get to the bottom of it. I'm gonna ask questions. And instead of getting fearful, clear answers, Jesus is giving him these powerful statements, and actually defying him and saying, you have no power over me. The Father could send 12 legions of angels and this place would be undone. I mean, that doesn't sound like a guy who's being cowed by the place. And Pilate says, I'm going to go beat him up. And I beat him up and hopefully service the bloodlust of the people. And I'm going to come out and wash my hands. And he's just one thing after the next where Pilate seems the one disadvantaged in this place. And Jesus is the calm one who who responds in simple, clear sentences with great confidence. And I think that's a different way to hear the story. And it's part of the story if we think spatially about who is advantaged and who may be disadvantaged. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, I heard. Yes, Pauline.
Okay, up there, if there's an attack, the soldiers would line up there and fire down, right? What are the little slots down about 20 foot or so?
Yeah. So again, this isn't a wall from the biblical era. So what I'm about to describe is a 16th century rather than a first century thing. Those are slots for shooting arrows. And if you go behind that, it's like a concave thing so that you can actually turn like this and never expose yourself to fire, and yet have a pretty full range of fire down on those who might be approaching the wall. Yeah, Mike.
So how much of the story that you just related is just the political reality of that time? I mean, Pilate was a governor. He wasn't wasn't an emperor. He was at the pleasure of the emperor, right? And those guys didn't tend to live very long.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, and Pilate himself was partially undone, Mike, I think, by the realities of his circumstances. We have a report, an ancient report of people going to Rome and complaining about him. And I'll quote here from Philo, first century historian, talking about the complaint about the governor by stating in full the briberies, the insults, the robberies, the outrages, the wrong injuries, the executions without trial, and constantly repeated the ceaseless and supremely grievous cruelty. It wouldn't be long before Pilate lost his job after this. And so he is on the edge, and yet his verdict was irreversible by anyone in the empire except Caesar. So I mean, in this particular case, he had the upper hand judicially, I think. Yeah, he had the upper hand judicially, even though politically he was skating on thinner ice. Very good.